Good morning. How is everyone? Warm? You have electricity in your house? God. Interesting couple of days that we've had here in the high country, as it's called, in Prescott, Arizona. Winter storms. Actually, it's quite exciting and beautiful once you have power in your house. So, speaking about power, this morning I'm talking about our soul. I can remember as a child writing notes, and in those notes, as I have gone back to reread them, I talked so much about the soul. Of course, without any definitions whatsoever. It just was such a beautiful idea to know that we have a soul. And I would talk to my friends and my family members about how important it is that we all realize that we have a soul and to be a soul. And, you know, this little kid preaching to the choir probably. Anyway, not really knowing what the soul was from a more scientific or esoteric scientific, approach until I found the teaching. And now as we study Torquam Sardarian's writings and Agni Yoga, we really have been given such a gift in these teachings to learn what the soul is, and that the soul has a treasury. And the more we find opportunities to dig into and discover those treasuries, the more life becomes significant. Each life becomes significant. No matter what that life is doing in this incarnation, it is significant because that life has a soul. One of the treasures of the soul is immortality. But before we can find and experience immortality, we're told that we must find a way to lift ourselves out of the prison that our soul is in, our physical, emotional, and mental prison. And prisons they are indeed. The soul has lived in these worlds, in these three prisons, for so long that he has lost his contact with the higher, the more subtle realms of consciousness. So during these days approaching the winter solstice and Christmas, this is a wonderful time to really ponder about the soul and where our own soul seems to be imprisoned and how we can release it from 1, 2, or 3 of these prisons and gain contact with the higher, more subtle realms. Because this is the time of year, plus the Aries, Taurus, Gemini time of year, to really, it's like this portal opens up. It's like the Rourke paintings, if you've ever seen those paintings where there is a window or a door where that entity, that beautiful little being is looking out over the vast horizon. That's opening yourself, your soul, to the higher worlds, those subtle realms that we read about and dream about and hope to experience someday. Now is the time. This month is the time. Winter solstice is the time. We're experiencing the new group of world servers year, which happens once every 7 years. We're experiencing that this year. So let's take advantage, take opportunity of this month and see if we can discover and recognize those 3 prisons that we find our soul enslaved in, and see if we can't make contact with the higher, more subtle realms. One of the aims of spiritual education is to teach us how to awaken our soul from its slumber, to help it become aware of the self. The self is our true nature. And once we become aware of this self, now we're on the path of immortality, lifting ourselves out of the prison and walking toward immortality. For the awakened soul, immortality is found in one who has escaped, the soul that has escaped from these prisons, and becomes increasingly aware of his ascent to the all-self. Meditation, interestingly enough, meditation is a process that leads us into immortality. So meditation is important. The kind of meditation that we're talking about here is seed thought meditation, not, the popular meditations that are found in different types of yoga, except in Agni yoga. Now, Raja yoga, Agni yoga, you're going to find meditations starting with seed thought types of meditations on into more advanced meditations that will release the soul, release the spark from these prisons that it's anchored itself in, and truly experience moments of contact with the true self. Really meaningful meditation is to pull yourself from the domination of your body, from the pulls of your emotional nature, and from the distractions, the many distractions of the intellect, so that we can withdraw into the higher spheres. When we can do this and suddenly see ourselves sitting back there, is that first moment that you realize you're more than the physical body, that the physical body is a vehicle that takes you from here to here to here when you're in incarnation. But there is more than that, and we know this because we have read stories written by Helena Rourke, where she talks about her travels, that are not in the physical body, but in her subtle bodies. The first time you have such an experience, you'll never forget it. When you naturally withdraw, naturally, not through drugs and weird experiences, but when you naturally withdraw yourself from your physical body and objectively see it, and then come back into your body, that's when you know that you are not the body. When you, the physical body, when you experience firsthand that you are not the physical body, you will no longer believe that when your body dies, your consciousness dies with it. What is the most important thing in our life? It's interesting to talk to people and ask them this question. And when you do, you learn how anchored, how imprisoned we are to elements and objects that are related to our physical life. Our lover, our partner, our spouse, our money, our car, our position. But these are, every single one of these things that we or they designate as the most important thing in our life can be lost. So what happens when we lose one or even all of these most important things? What happens to that person's life then? How do they live their life when all of the most important things in their life have been taken away? This is when such unfortunate things like this happen is when typically and hopefully and normally is when a person begins to search for their soul. So it is not when we become aware. It is not, I should have reread my talk this morning. I was sitting back there in my chair with my pen saying, no, I can't say this is not right. Anyway, I wrote this too fast. Anyway, it is not until we become aware of the soul that we discover the lotus, and we discover in the lotus that there is a jewel. And in the teachings, you're going to read this phrase so frequently, that we each have a jewel in the lotus, and that jewel is our soul. But it's not until we become aware of the soul that we learn and experience and recognize that there's something truly, truly beautiful within our own mechanism, and that's called the lotus. And in that lotus is the jewel that we must find. This is the treasury of the soul, the jewel in the lotus. Christ told a story about a rich man. It is so beautiful, but most people don't understand his words. So there was a rich man. Well, who is the rich man? It is the outer shell. You know how shocking this is to those who answered that question, what is the most important thing in your life? Or the most important object in your life? It would be to be rich. To be rich, but they don't know what that means. It means the outer shell. The rich man had a reputation, had a position, had clothing, had everything. That's the rich man. Suddenly Christ says, there is some land, and in that land is a jewel. My goodness, says the rich man. I must go now, and I must sell everything that I have to buy that land so I can get that jewel. What does it mean to sell? It means to give up. Give up your drugs, your alcohol, your cigarettes. It also means to stop living. This is interesting. To stop living to make a living. To stop living to make a living. To make more and more money. To worry about not having enough money to spend. To give up manipulating others. To gain power over them. To give up being mean and ugly or depressed and silly. To give up all these unreal things and find your jewel, the treasures of your soul. Can we sacrifice and renounce everything to find that jewel? I was reading a story that I so wanted to share this morning. It's like too long. It's too long, but it's very similar and yet more advanced than this story that was told by Christ. It was a story about a king who was truly a magnificent human being. All the people in his land loved him. The land was peaceful. Everybody had enough money. You had enough food to eat and so on and so forth. And yet the king was still not happy. He said, I still haven't done what I know I am supposed to do. And so this greater king, which was a sage, says, well, isn't that interesting? He hasn't had enough challenges. Let me give him some challenges and see if he can still remain that wonderful leader in his kingship. And so this king went through horrible, horrible events. One of them was so bad I knew I couldn't even express it here this morning because he was, well, I can't tell you. Anyway, it was really, really gross. And I'm thinking, oh, but this is such a magnificent story. But the king survived. He didn't complain. He didn't feel like he was a victim. He knew that these challenges, these horrific experiences that he had been given to go through, was going to make him what he really wanted to be. That's something that was missing in his life. And when he got to the end of those tests, and this great sage came to him, he said, "Now you are immortal." So even though the idea behind that story, even though he had accomplished so much in his life, there was still something missing. He hadn't yet recognized he was a soul. He hadn't tapped into that treasury yet of immortality. And so he went through all of these horrific tests, passed the tests, and became immortal. Now, that was 3.5 pages of a story. So now you know a little of the story, and maybe someday we can just make a whole lecture around that story, because it's really, except that little part. So what can we sacrifice? And how can we renounce things in our life that will allow us to find the jewel in the lotus? Are we really, really searching for that jewel in the lotus? Here's a meditation that you might want to experience to help you in your search for that jewel. In your meditation, normally we start with alignment of our 3 bodies: physical, emotional, mental body. After these 3 bodies are aligned, it's just like sounding a chord, musical chord, where all 3 notes are in harmony with one another. You sound the 3 ohms. The next part is to make a connection. The next point, after you've gone through the alignment, sounded 3 ohms, is to make a connection with the heart of your group. Then the soul of the group. So you've done the alignment, you've sounded the 3 ohms. Now you are making a connection with the heart of the group, and then the soul of the group. The next point is you're going to ask yourself a question. And the question is this: am I aware of what I am searching for? Now that may sound strange, but most people are not aware of what they're searching for. And that's why there's always something missing. They don't know what's missing in their lives. Have you heard people say that? I've heard so many people say, there's something missing in my life. I don't know what it is. And then they fill in the blank with, objects that they think are the most important object in their life. That object leaves, and they become depressed and lost. So we want to ask ourselves in this meditation, am I aware of what I am searching for? And then ask, how and where is my search going on? How and where is my search going on? And then finally, after you find some answers for this question, these 2 questions, and honestly, these questions are not just limited to your meditation experience that moment, but you're going to find these 2 questions still kind of, it's like when you take some water and put it in a pot and stick it on your stove and it starts to boil, and then you rev up the heat or the flame, and it's because I have a gas stove, so I can rev that flame up, and the bubbles keep getting bigger and bigger and more. What do they become? Big bubbles. The water is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Well, this is what these 2 questions are like when you start thinking about it and the answers. It starts out kind of tepid and cold, And the more you get into the more you start having experiences and recognition through these experiences and through your sacrifices and so forth, then it's like this flame is ignited and the soul is on its way. So the next point is to identify with the one that is inside of yourself. You're going to identify with the spark, with the soul that is within yourself. The spark that is searching for the jewel. Think of all the fairy tales that we have read and were read to when we were kids. The one that is searching for the jewel. Imagine yourself as the searching soul. So if we can just hold that image of this meditation this month and imagine yourself as a searching soul, you're going to go through this month in a very different way than most people are going to experience. Nicholas Rourke painted a painting called The Path of Searching. Look it up on the internet, just Path of Searching by Nicholas Rourke. It's very beautiful. So what are we searching for? Youth? Well, not really. Not anymore. It's a thing of the past for some of us. But some of us are still looking for that, right? That youth. Yeah, it's interesting. I won't go into that. Anyway, youth and looks and money and popularity and power. Or are we searching for the jewel in the lotus, the immortality of the soul? A boy came to a Chinese master and said, "Can I learn in your monastery?" And the master said, "Yes, my son." He said, "Come here and enter the river." So the boy entered the river, and it was 5 feet deep. The teacher put his hand on the boy's head and pushed the boy under the water. 1, 2, 3, 4. You could just imagine it. 5, 6. The boy is dying. 8, 9, 10. And then he came up. Can you feel yourself breathing? He's like, "Oh, this is so great." Okay, so he came up. And then the teacher asked, "Why did you come up? What were you really striving for? What were you really aspiring for when you were under the water?" "Air." Well, the teacher said, if you, in just that way, search for the teaching, it will be given to you. The teaching is life. When you talk to your friends and your family about the teaching, remember this thought form as you use the word teaching. Teaching is the life. It's not dogma, it's not doctrine, it is life. The teaching is the life. But we haven't really begun such a search because we are still fooling around with man-made treasures. I think of the comments yesterday and the day before from my friends and co-workers that went without electricity. Some went without electricity for 5, 6 hours, some 36 hours. It's like air, right? And during that time, what'd you do during those 36 hours? What did you do with your time? So we haven't really begun such a search because we are still fooling around with man-made treasures. Money, greed, power, position, and so forth. But we need these things, but they're not the most important things in our life. The Most High gave us money, for example, to provide for our needs. A few years ago, Torkham, a teacher to many of us, said that because of our misuse of money, he said we may lose it. And we see this happening already. The majority of people no longer see their money. It goes from their place of work into their checking account. They access their checking account online and direct payments to their credit cards, utilities, and so forth through the internet. We go to the grocery store and pay for our groceries with our debit card. A device is used that automatically withdraws our money from the bank. We never see the money. The same thing at the gas station. Soon it will be very unusual to see someone carrying money in their billfold or purse. There was a most beautiful woman. She grew up in a very loving family, one that was very spiritual. They were poor people, so she did not have the many distractions that her rich friends had. When she grew up, she became a very powerful executive. She would read books that would help her become more and more powerful and increasingly wealthy. But she wasn't happy. She would call me and tell me about her problems, about how many people were suing her, about how many lawyers she had to hire. And then she would complain about the long hours she was working, day and night. I would ask her if she had finished her meditation lesson that she began 6 months ago. She would sadly say she simply didn't have the time. Her life was too busy. Then one day she called me saying, "You must help me. I am dying. What can I do?" And 2 months later, she died, a very wealthy young woman. She thought the jewel in life was money. But in the last days of her life, her money was no longer her God. It was air. See, the teaching. Most people are still just fooling around with the fish in the ocean of life. Humanity has been taught to be materialistic, to be totalitarian, to be self-interested. And by teaching them these things, we are killing their soul for centuries. A child wants to become an artist. It's the only thing he wants to be. And his mother says, "No, you will not make a living being an artist." The mother kills the child's soul. Let your children, let your grandchildren be free to be what they want to be. A wife pleads to her husband, "Please let me meditate. Please let me go to the classes. Please let me study." And he says, "No, are you crazy?" By saying these things, we are killing the soul of that person. Let them be free. To experience immortality every day, begin to think. Consciously think. Pull your soul up to the higher mind and think from the heights. I had this experience last night. It was so maddening. It was a very difficult experience. You know how Facebook will send you these memories? Do you want to repost the memory? Nobody will see it. We won't share it unless you say it's okay. Well, this particular memory happened to be of Jeff, my son, and this magazine cover that he was on. And he had his fishing gear and everything, and he was going over to the stream to fish. And there was a very nice quotation about him, but across the bottom of the magazine. So I posted it, even though I posted it like 6 years ago. And it wasn't but a few minutes later, I saw the post had been removed. And then I realized there was some member in the family that had contacted Facebook and asked to have it be removed because she had given that photo to me. 3 hours. You could not believe what was going through my mind. It was so sad. I had given that action complete control. And I thought, that action is eating me up. You know, like blackbirds in this story about the king that was being massacred. Anyway, so I'm probably 95% now back in control over those thoughts. But I thought, how sad that there's so much darkness in that person. That darkness is not in me. I was sad, but it was a picture. You know, it was just a picture. To experience immortality every day, we must begin to consciously think, to pull our soul up into the higher mind and think from the heights. I listened to some students of the teaching today criticizing our great teachers. In taking this approach, they are killing the spirit of admiration in the minds of their friends and co-workers. They're planting seeds of doubt. This kills the treasures of the soul. They say, for example, Mozart. You know, Mozart was insane. Dostoevsky, stupid. Lincoln, he was a fraud. Schubert was a mongoloid. We must be I know those are extreme examples, but this is what people say. We must be very careful in what we tell others so as not to kill the spirit of admiration, which is another treasure of the soul. Another treasure of the soul is love. We need to build our soul with love. There is a Sufi tale, a simple but profound tale, about learning to love unreservedly. Mullah Nasruddin decided to start a flower garden. He prepared the soil and planted the seeds of many beautiful flowers. But when they came up, his garden was filled not just with his chosen flowers, but also overrun by dandelions. He sought out advice from gardeners all over and tried every method known to get rid of them, but to no avail. Finally, he walked all the way to the capital to speak to the royal gardener at the sheikh's palace. The wise old man had counseled many gardeners before and suggested a variety of remedies to expel the dandelions, but Mullah had already tried them all. They sat together in silence for some time, and finally the gardener, looking at Nasruddin, said, "Well, then I suggest you learn to love them." Isn't that wise and profound and simple? Then I suggest you learn to love them. We need to construct our inner temple our chalice. Once we construct our inner temple, the next step is going to be to develop will. Will is also a treasure of the soul, but it does need to be developed. There's a wonderful book titled The Mystery of Willpower by Torquem Sardarian. You should read that book so you will be ready to understand how to develop the will. We are told that truly few people have developed the will, except those we call the great ones, like the Lord Buddha and Christ and a few others. Most of us are at the stage where we are striving to develop love. Love is one of the most powerful treasures of the soul, but it must be developed, interestingly enough. Throughout millions of years, mankind tries to love, and as he loves, he is becoming a soul. As we love, we are becoming finally a soul. Not an animal soul, a human soul. We must educate ourselves to understand the energy of love as the builder and the energy of the human soul. The human soul is love, and as it reaches perfection, our love will someday be perfect, and our human soul will finally become the embodiment of love. One day, two women were working in the office, editing the book At the Threshold of the New World. They were so excited. They read to me a portion from the book about the cosmic magnet. The passage read, "The focus of the cosmic magnet of our universe is found at the center of the Milky Way's ring. The constellation Hercules is the nearest guidepost pointing to the center of our ring, Milky Way ring. To cultivate higher and higher levels of love for our developing soul, we can contact the frequency of the cosmic magnet, the heart center of our universe." See, these are the subtle realms. If we can release our soul from the imprisonment of the body and the emotions and the intellect, we can contact the frequency of the cosmic magnet, which is the heart center of our universe, the center of the Milky Way, to perfect our soul and love. The cosmic magnet is the cosmic heart of the universe. The highest source of the teaching on all levels is called the cosmic heart. I'm going to repeat this because there's someone that asked me a question a few days ago, and this is the answer to that question. The highest source of the teaching on all levels is called the cosmic heart. It does not come from the spark. The teaching comes from the cosmic magnet, the cosmic heart. It is a central organ. The cosmic heart is a central organ in the galaxy, which controls the life currents of all life forms existing within the galaxy. It is the central organ in the galaxy which controls the life currents of all life forms existing within the galaxy. Can we even have the courage and the daring to think this way? Another term for the cosmic heart is the chalice of the cosmos. Each of us has a chalice, and that chalice is, through that chalice is how we contact the chalice of the cosmos. So each of us has a chalice, some more developed than others, Some have a chalice that is still a bud, others have a fully developed flowering chalice. When you have a full developed flowering chalice, you will be drawing the beauty, light, and love from that cosmic magnet, from the chalice of the cosmos, which is what Christ and Buddha had. So the more we develop the potentials of our soul, the greater our expression of divinity. So here are 4 or 5 potentials for you to memorize, to think about, and to become. The first is the purity of motive. This is a real tough one to develop because usually there is an element of self-interest underlying the motives of whatever we engage in. So that motive can be good or not good, but we want to purify our motives. This is one of the treasures of the soul. Also, creativity is the next. Generosity is the next. Knowledge is the next, and wisdom. Those are the five of the treasures of the soul. If you develop purity of motive, become more creative and generous, when you increase your knowledge and wisdom, you will be increasing the expression of the divinity of your soul. See, when I was that little girl preaching to my family about the soul, I had no idea. It just felt right, you know? But now we're developing the mental body and we have to know the facts. So those are 5 facts. How to develop and release the divinity of our soul. Have you ever felt or had a sense of your inner divinity? Have you ever had an experience where you were headed down the wrong road and something within you redirected your footsteps? Have you ever been lost in the desert, but out of nowhere you were given a cup of water? In every one of us, there is a Most High. We must start living a life that is respectful to the Most High within us. Think about someone in history whose life demonstrated the Most High within him. For example, Gandhi. His life was an expression of power and transformation. His power was drawn from his divinity, the Most High in him, the Christ within. He could mobilize 6 million people to attack the British Army. The British said, "This is a very dangerous man. We are going to put him in prison." And Gandhi said, "Okay." And while he was in prison, what did he do? He increased his knowledge. One of the treasures of the soul. He told the guards to bring him a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. As he read and translated the Bhagavad Gita, he learned techniques and tactics to overcome the British Empire. The Bhagavad Gita's main purpose is to say that there is a divinity within us that cannot be conquered. Gandhi said that if this is true, then he knew he was going to be a conqueror. And he did it. When we live a life that respects our inner divinity, we too will be a conqueror. Remember, never give up. Disciples never give up. We need to try to make our thoughts, our words, our actions in harmony with the understanding that we have, what we have about the divinity within us. Sometimes people say to me that my coworker is not expressing their divinity. They are doing this and that, and they are getting away with it. So why should I continue to strive? Well, you can read biblical statements about this, even Sina Fosdick says it in her own way, is just worry about yourself. That's what it boils down to. Just worry about yourself. If you begin to develop the treasures of your soul, you will become an honest example to that co-worker. Soon they will want to become just like you, rather than wanting you to become just like them. So today I've talked about immortality, love, will, the Most High within us, the spirit of admiration, purity of motive, creativity, generosity, knowledge, and wisdom. These are treasures which, if we strive to develop them between now and the day that we take our last breath, we're going to become a great initiate. Our next life, we will return and lead humanity. So it is a soul and its treasures that are the light, is the light that leads us to other worlds. So we have learned a lot today about our soul, but perhaps the most important thing that we've learned is that we need to search a little bit more deeply, and discover where this search is taking us.